Welcome back to Haunted Horror Stories. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true disturbing stories from the Quebec forest. These are tales of people who ventured into cold trails, forgotten cuts, and cabin country and found something they were never meant to see. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. The air up there always smells like wet pennies right before the sun drops. That sharp, metallic cold that makes your nose sting even if you're not breathing hard. I'd forgotten that, honestly. I'd been living in Montreal for a few years at that point, and winter in the city is different, more exhaust, more slush, more noise. Out there in the Quebec forest, it's just the trees and whatever's moving inside them. I only went because my uncle's cabin needed checking. He'd had a small stroke the month before, nothing dramatic, but enough to scare him into letting other people handle cabin stuff. He asked if I could drive up and make sure the pipes hadn't burst and the generator still worked. It wasn't a big ask. It was a key and a list on a torn piece of notebook paper. I brought a thermos of coffee that tasted like burnt plastic because I left the lid open in my car for a week. I brought 2 gas cans that banged together every time I hit a bump. I brought a box of those granola bars with the yogurt coating that always breaks off and turns into sugary dust. And I brought my old blue wool scarf even though it made my neck itch, because it was the one thing that still smelled like cedar from my uncle's woodpile. I remember thinking, this is stupid, but it's true. I remember thinking it felt nice to be needed by a place again. The driveway was barely a driveway anymore. Just 2 tire grooves through snow, with little saplings bending in over them like they were trying to knit the path closed. I had to get out once to kick a drift away from the tires. My boots squeaked the way they do when the snow's really dry. And I noticed something then that I didn't file as important. I noticed how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, more like somebody had just turned a radio off and you're waiting for the click, but it never comes. The cabin itself was fine from the outside. Tin roof, small porch, the usual. There was a canoe flipped upside down beside a pile of chopped logs, and the canoe had a skin of ice on it like a glaze. I remember tapping it with my knuckle and feeling the vibration travel through my finger bones. Inside smelled like old smoke and mouse droppings and that sweet, dusty smell you get from blankets that haven't been moved in a while. I set my gloves on the table, took my boots off because my uncle is weird about that even when he's not there, and went straight to the breaker box like I was supposed to. The power was off, which didn't surprise me. He shuts it down if he's not coming up for weeks. I flipped the main, then the generator switch, and I listened for that familiar chug to catch. Nothing. I tried again, still nothing. I told myself the battery was dead. It happens. Cold kills batteries. Simple. I went back outside with the gas can, because even if it was the battery, I wanted to make sure the fuel line wasn't dry. The sun was sinking behind the tree line, and the light had that blue-gray color where everything looks flat, like the world's been printed on cheap paper. That's when I heard the first sound that didn't belong. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't even loud. It was measured, 3 knocks, somewhere in the woods to my left beyond the canoe and the woodpile. Knock, knock, knock. I froze with my hand on the gas can handle. My brain went immediately to something normal, a woodpecker, a branch hitting a trunk, ice cracking, but it was too even, too deliberate. I waited and my breath sounded huge in my ears. Then it happened again, closer, knock, knock, knock. I remember laughing under my breath just a little because that's what I do when I'm uncomfortable. I said out loud like an idiot, "Okay." And then, because my brain wanted to file it away as not my problem, I walked around the cabin to the generator shed. The snow there was smoother, less disturbed. My uncle doesn't go behind the cabin much. There's a slope down to a small creek and then nothing but trees, I'd been back there as a kid, but not in years. The shed door was half open. That was the second thing. The door shouldn't have been half open. He keeps it latched. And there hadn't been any fresh footprints on the porch when I arrived. No tracks in the driveway other than mine. I told myself the wind had done it. The latch could have frozen and popped. It wasn't impossible. I pulled the door open the rest of the way and the smell hit me. Gasoline, old oil, and something sour like wet dog. The generator sat there silent and black with a thin dusting of snow on top like someone had sprinkled flour over it. Snow, inside the shed. I remember frowning at that, trying to make it make sense. The roof didn't look damaged. The walls were intact. No holes. And then I saw the marks. 3 long scratches in the snow on top of the generator. Like something had dragged its fingers across it, but not deep, just enough to leave lines. My stomach did that little drop it does on roller coasters. I bent closer without really thinking, and I noticed something that made my mouth go dry. At the end of each scratch, there was a small crescent-shaped indentation, like a nail, like a claw. I straightened up fast. I told myself it was a raccoon, a marten. Something that got in and climbed around. But the shed was closed mostly, and those scratches, they were too straight. I turned to leave, and that's when I heard the third knock again, except this time it wasn't in the woods. It was on the shed wall behind me. Knock, knock, knock. The sound went through the wood and into my back like a vibration. I spun around so hard I almost slipped, and there was nothing there, just the wall, just old boards. I stood there with my heart sprinting, holding my breath like that would help. And I heard, this part is hard to explain without sounding dramatic, I heard someone inhale on the other side of the wall, like they were right up against it, smelling me through the cracks. I told myself it was the wind, it had to be. The cold air shifting through gaps, the cabin settling. But then the boards bulged, not like they were breaking, just pushing outward in the shape of something pressing from inside, not a whole body. More like a shoulder. A shoulder and part of an arm. The wood creaked but didn't snap. It flexed like it was rubber. My hands went numb instantly, like my blood just left them. I backed up until my shoulders hit the generator and I could feel the cold metal through my jacket. Then right through the boards I heard my uncle's voice. Not yelling, not panicked, just tired, like he was calling from another room. Daphne, it said. I didn't answer. I didn't even breathe, because my uncle wasn't there. The voice came again, soft and coaxing. Come on, it's cold. The wood bowed again, and something pale slid into one of the cracks between boards. Not a finger exactly, too flat, like a strip of skin pressed thin. And here's the thing that made it real, the thing I still see when I close my eyes. If I wake up at 3 a.m. it had a fingernail, but the nail was sideways, like someone had turned it 90 degrees. A long, narrow plate of yellowish keratin growing along the side of the finger instead of the top. That's what broke whatever paralysis I was in. I stumbled out of the shed and nearly fell face first into the snow. I didn't go toward the cabin door right away because, this sounds dumb, I didn't want to turn my back to the shed. My brain kept insisting something would come out, something would rush me. I heard the knocking start up again, not in threes anymore, faster, like an impatient tapping. I ran to the cabin, boots half on, snow filling the tops, fingers fumbling with the key. I remember the metal biting my skin through my glove because it was so cold. Inside, I slammed the door and threw the bolt, then stood there listening. Silence. For maybe 10 seconds I convinced myself I'd imagined it, that the stress, the cold, the isolation, I'd worked myself up. Then the cabin walls answered back with the same tapping, not hard enough to shake the boards, just enough to let me know it was there. Tap, 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 moving, circling. I backed away from the windows. The cabin had those thin curtains my aunt left up years ago, the ones with little faded pine trees printed on them. I pulled one aside just a centimeter barely. At first I saw nothing, just darkening trunks, the snow reflecting a weak blue light, the canoe like a black lump. Then something moved between two trees, not walking, sliding, like it didn't have to lift its feet. I only saw it clearly once, but that was enough. It was the shape of a person in the loosest sense, 2 legs, torso, head, but the proportions were wrong. The shoulders were too narrow and too high, like they were pinned near the ears. The arms hung down almost to its knees, and the elbows bent the wrong way, a smooth reverse fold. Its skin looked like birch bark that had been soaked too long, pale, mottled, almost peeling. And where its face should have been, there was a flat oval, with a mouth that wasn't a mouth. It was a seam, like someone had stitched 2 pieces of material together. When it looked toward the cabin, that seam unzipped, not with teeth, with tiny, pale, rigid points that clicked against each other like zipper teeth. I don't know why that sound is what destroyed me. It was so small, so domestic, like a coat zipper in a quiet room. I dropped the curtain and backed into the kitchen table hard enough to rattle my thermos. I told myself, get the truck, get out. It can't follow a vehicle. That's what my brain offered up like a bargain. But the thought of stepping outside again made me feel like vomiting. The tapping stopped, and I realized something worse. It stopped because it was listening. From the left side of the cabin, my uncle's voice again. Closer now, as if his mouth was right against the wall. Daphne, open the door. I forgot my keys. I pressed both hands over my mouth so I wouldn't make a sound. My eyes watered from how hard I was breathing through my nose. Then came my aunt's voice. My aunt died when I was 15. And I hadn't thought about her voice in years, not really. I remembered her laugh, sure, but not the exact shape of how she said words. This thing had it perfectly. Honey, it said, warm and scolding, don't be rude. The part of me that's still a kid wanted to answer, wanted to believe, wanted the world to go back to normal. And then, this is where the cabin stopped feeling like protection. The door handle began to turn, slowly, testing, like someone polite trying not to wake you. The bolt held. I watched the handle rotate back and forth a little, each movement accompanied by that zipper click sound from outside, like it was breathing with its mouth. I don't remember grabbing my coat. I don't remember deciding. I just remember suddenly being in motion, yanking open the back window over the sink, the one my uncle always complains sticks, and hearing the wood crack as I forced it. Cold air poured in like water. I climbed out without thinking about the drop. My boots hit snow, my knee sank, and pain shot up my leg. I got up anyway. I ran along the back of the cabin toward the slope because I couldn't see the front from there, and my brain said, better the unknown than the door. The creek was a dark ribbon under a thin crust of ice. I slipped and caught myself on a sapling. My glove tore. I remember the sting of cold on my palm like a burn. Behind me, the zipper click came again. Closer. I didn't look back. I kept going downhill, half sliding, grabbing branches, breathing in sharp bursts. The forest around me felt wrong, too still, too orderly, like the trees were standing at attention. I hit a patch of open ground near the creek where the snow was thinner, and I saw something that made me stop, even though stopping made no sense. A boot print. One single boot print in the snow, perfectly pressed, pointed toward the cabin. No other prints led up to it. None led away. It was like a foot had come down from above, touched the earth once, and lifted back into the sky. My brain tried to rationalize it even then. Maybe the wind filled the others. Maybe I was missing them. Maybe the light. But I could see my own messy tracks. I could see the drag marks from when I slid. That lone print was too clean. I ran again. I followed the creek because it was the only thing that felt like a rule I could trust. Water leads somewhere. Water doesn't lie. The zipper click followed me, sometimes close, sometimes far enough that I thought maybe I'd lost it. At one point I heard my own voice behind me, my own voice saying my name, but slightly off, like it didn't know how to shape it. Daphne, it called, careful, practicing. That nearly made me fall. Hearing yourself outside your body, it does something to you. It makes you feel like you're already dead. Eventually, I saw the faint glow of my truck's reflective strip in the distance through the trees because I'd looped around without realizing it. The slope had led me in a wide arc back toward the driveway. I don't know how long that took. 10 minutes? An hour? Time felt like chewing gum, stretchy and useless. When I reached the truck, the driver's side door was open. I had shut it. I'm sure I had. I remember the sound of the latch. The interior light was on, glowing weakly in the twilight, and inside, on the seat, was my blue wool scarf. The one I'd left inside the cabin. It was folded neatly, like someone had taken the time. I stood there shaking so hard my teeth clicked. I told myself maybe I'd brought it out. Maybe I'd dropped it. Maybe. But I could smell the cedar on it, fresh, like it had just been held against a wood pile. I got in without closing the door properly. I turned the key and the engine didn't catch. It just clicked. Once. Twice. I whispered, "Come on," like the truck could hear me. Behind me in the trees, the zipper click. Then the engine finally roared to life, loud and ugly and perfect. I slammed the door and threw it into reverse so hard the tires spun, spraying snow. As I backed down the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror once. Just once. Between the trees near the cabin, something pale was standing where the porch should have been. Not fully on it, more like hovering right in front of it. And it lifted its arm. Not waving, pointing at me. I didn't stop until I hit a main road and saw another set of headlights. I pulled over then and just sat there, hands locked on the steering wheel, breathing like I'd been underwater. The aftermath proof, it came later when I got home. I told myself I'd imagined the scarf. I told myself fear made me sloppy. But when I washed my torn glove, I found a thin, pale sliver stuck in the ripped seam like a clipped nail. Sideways curved, yellowed, hard as plastic. I put it in a jar. I don't know why, I've never shown anyone. Sometimes I take it out and hold it up to the light, and it looks like nothing, just a weird clipping. But every winter, when the air smells like wet pennies and the sun drops too fast, I remember the sound of that zipper mouth opening in the trees, and I swear I can hear it faintly from the corner of my apartment. Story 2. The thing about Quebec forests is they don't feel like wilderness the way people picture it. It's not always dramatic peaks and sweeping views. A lot of it is just endless. Spruce and fir and birch repeating like a pattern you can't solve. I was driving a delivery route north for a small outfitting company. Nothing glamorous, just bins of gear and a box of mail that always smelled like cardboard and diesel. It was late afternoon, maybe closer to evening. I can't pin the time because my dashboard clock had been blinking 12:00 for a week, and I kept forgetting to fix it. I had a pack of gum in the cup holder that had gone stale. I had a half-empty bottle of orange sports drink that tasted like chemicals. I had a headache from the heater blasting hot air at my face. I took a shortcut I shouldn't have. It was one of those logging roads that looks decent until it doesn't. Packed snow at first, then ruts, then soft patches where the truck starts to fishtail. I told myself I'd done it before. I told myself the GPS wouldn't send me somewhere impassable. I told myself a lot of things that sound arrogant now, but at the time they felt reasonable. Then the road ended in a kind of wide clearing with a line of trees cut back like someone took a giant bite out of the forest. There was an old shack there, more like a storage hut, half collapsed, roof sagging, the door hanging open. I stopped because I thought maybe there'd be a turnaround. Also because this is embarrassing. I saw something hanging from a branch near the shack and my brain went, maybe someone left a marker. Maybe there's a sign. It wasn't a sign. It was a string of small animal bones tied together with what looked like fishing line, and the bones were painted, not with spray paint, with something dark and matte like ink. The symbols weren't letters, just looping shapes repeated. It looked almost careful. I told myself it was hunters messing around, kids, someone bored. But when the wind moved, those little bones clicked together in a rhythm that sounded like teeth chattering. I got back in the truck and tried to reverse. The tires spun and dug down into a soft patch. The truck sank just enough that I felt the frame settle. That's when I heard my phone ring. I was relieved, stupidly relieved, like the world was handing me a normal moment. I looked at the screen. No service, no bars, but it was ringing anyway. The caller ID was my own number. I stared at it, waiting for it to stop, waiting for the screen to correct itself. It didn't. The ringtone was loud in the cab, tinny and wrong. I didn't answer. I let it ring out. Then it rang again, same thing, my own number. I remember my fingers hovering over the screen and this cold sweat starting at the base of my neck, even though the heater was blasting. I told myself it was a glitch. Phones do weird stuff when there's no signal. Maybe it was cached. Maybe it was trying to reconnect. Then the voicemail icon appeared. A new voicemail from me. I didn't play it right away. I stared at it like if I stared long enough the universe would get embarrassed and take it back. I hit play. At first it was just static, a thick hiss. Then I heard breathing, fast, panicked. And then my own voice whispering, don't go to the shack. Behind that whisper, another sound. Like wet footsteps on snow, like someone dragging something heavy. The message cut off. I sat there with my mouth open, not making a sound. My brain tried to do its job, tried to interpret. Maybe someone recorded me. Maybe it's a prank. Maybe my phone recorded something earlier. Maybe. Outside, the clearing was still. The shack door moved slightly in the breeze. Then, from inside the shack, I heard my voice again, not through the phone, through the air. Hey, it called, casual. You okay out there? It was pitched slightly wrong, like my voice, but wearing it like a jacket that didn't fit the shoulders. I leaned forward and put my forehead against the steering wheel. I did that thing where you try to make yourself small, like if you don't look, nothing can see you. I tried the truck again. Reverse, gas. The tires spun uselessly. Snow sprayed up behind me. The phone rang again. This time I answered. I don't know why. I think some part of me wanted to confront it. Or wanted to hear something normal. Or maybe I just wanted it to stop ringing. When I put it to my ear, there was silence, then a soft click, then my own voice right there, whispering like it was pressed against my eardrum. I can see your hands. I dropped the phone like it burned me. It hit the floor mat and kept the call open on speaker. Through the speaker, the voice continued calm. Turn your head just a little. I didn't. I stared straight ahead through the windshield, eyes watering. And then, right outside my driver's side window, something tapped the glass. Not a hard knock. A fingernail tap. Delicate tap, tap, tap. I kept my eyes forward. I told myself it was a branch. I told myself it was ice. I told myself if I looked, I'd give it permission. I don't know where that thought even came from. The tapping moved along the glass toward the back window, like whatever it was had long fingers and was walking them across the truck. On the phone speaker, my voice said, almost amused, "You're making it boring." Then, from the shack, a different voice. A woman's voice this time, calling softly in French, gentle, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. It sounded like my mother when I was a kid, and I'd wandered too far in a grocery store. I don't speak French well, not fluently. but I understood enough to know she was saying, "Come here, it's okay, come here." I started to cry, quietly, just tears running down my face, because the voice hit some old part of me that wanted to be found. And that's when the iconic thing happened, the thing that makes no sense and still feels like my brain made it up, except for what it left behind. The driver's side mirror, the one angled so I could see the clearing behind me, filled with my own face, not reflected, not inside the cab, outside, pressed against the glass of the mirror like someone had put their cheek on it. My face looked wrong. The skin was too tight, too shiny like wax. The eyes weren't looking at me, they were looking past me, scanning the cab like a predator checking a trap. And the mouth moved without sound, shaping words. Then with a slow, practiced motion, that mouth smiled. And the teeth were all the same length, every tooth identical, like they'd been filed down into uniform little blocks. I made a sound then, a small animal sound. I slammed my fist down on the horn without thinking, just blaring it into the quiet. The face in the mirror flinched, actually flinched like it wasn't expecting noise, then slid away out of view. On the phone speaker, my voice hissed, angry now, "Don't do that." The woman's voice from the shack stopped. Silence. Then the truck shifted, just slightly, like the snow under the tires had firmed up. I don't know why, I didn't have time to question it. I threw it into low gear and gunned it forward. The tires grabbed. The truck lurched, climbing out of the rut like it had been freed. As I swung around the clearing, passing the shack, I glanced at it despite myself. Something stood in the doorway, half hidden by shadow. It had the outline of a person, but it wasn't steady. The edges of it seemed to waver like heat haze, and its head tilted the wrong way, too far, as if it was trying to match how humans do curiosity. It lifted a hand, and in its palm I saw my phone, my actual phone, the one that had been on my floor mat. I looked down. The floor mat was empty. I screamed then, full voice, and hit the gas so hard the truck bounced over the ruts. I didn't stop until I hit a larger road and saw the orange glow of a distant town. The aftermath proof came when I got to the outfitter's warehouse and finally found signal. My phone was back on the passenger seat. I hadn't put it there. The screen had one new photo. It was taken from outside the truck, through the driver's side window. You could see me in the seat, hunched forward, crying, hands on the wheel. And behind my head, pressed against the glass from outside, was a pale hand with fingers too long, splayed like it was measuring my skull. A story 3. I always thought snow made the woods feel safer, like it covered up the sharp things, like it turned everything into one clean surface. But there's a kind of snow, heavy, wet snow, that muffles the world so completely it feels like you've been wrapped in a blanket, and you don't notice you're suffocating until you try to speak. That's the kind of snow we had when my sister's boyfriend convinced us to try a winter hike near this old, forgotten trail. He was one of those people who collects experiences like souvenirs. He had a camera he treated like a pet. He had a stainless steel water bottle with dents in it from adventures. He kept calling it a quick out and back, like saying it that way made it true. It was the three of us, me, my sister Miley's, and her boyfriend Roan. Those are their names, and I'm only saying them because if you ever meet someone like Roan, you'll know the type. He means well. He just doesn't listen. We parked at a turnout where the snowplow had shoved a wall of snow up against the trees. There was no sign, no official trailhead, just a thin opening between trunks where someone's boots had packed down a path. I remember little stupid things. Roan forgot his hat and kept pulling his hood up and down. Miley's had those hand warmers that smelled faintly like iron, and she kept stuffing them in my pockets like I was a child. I had an old blister on my heel that I could feel even before we started. We argued about whether to bring the extra thermos, and I said no because I didn't want to carry it, and then I regretted it later. The first half hour was fine. Quiet, pretty snow weighing down branches, the kind of quiet where your thoughts get loud. We talked about nothing, movies, work, the fact that my sister's car needed new brakes. Normal. Then we found the first thing that didn't fit. A strip of bark propped upright against a tree, like someone placed it there intentionally. It was fresh, pale on the inside, and carved into it deeply with something sharp was a shape, not a word, not a symbol I recognized, a long oval head, too long, and 4 spindly legs coming out of it like a spider drawn by someone who'd never seen a spider. No arms, no body, just head and legs. Roan thought it was cool. He took a photo. Miley's laughed nervously and said maybe it was a kid. I told myself the same, kid, hunter, somebody bored, but the carving was too clean. Too confident, like whoever made it had carved it 100 times. We kept going, and the trail got narrower, less used, snow deeper, our breath hanging in front of us like smoke. At some point, I can't tell you when exactly because the trees all look the same, Miley stopped and said, "Do you hear that?" I listened. At first I heard nothing but our breathing. Then, faintly, a sound like something brushing against dry leaves. But there were no dry leaves. Everything was under snow. Roan waved it off. "Probably a squirrel," he said, and we all laughed because squirrels in winter, sure. The brushing sound continued, always just off to our right. Not coming closer, not fading away, just matching our pace. That's when my body started reacting even before my brain did. My shoulders tightening, my throat feeling tight, that sense you get when you're being watched in a store aisle. We reached a small hollow where the trail dipped down. The air was colder there, like cold pooling. The trees grew closer together. And the snow looked untouched. No prints, no animal tracks, no bird marks, a smooth white bowl. Our footprints stopped at the edge like we were hesitating to step in. Roan stepped first. His boots sank, making a deep, satisfying crunch. And then it happened. The snow under his foot gave a soft, hollow sound, not a crunch, a drum, like he'd stepped on a thin crust over a cavity. He froze. Looked at me with that "uh-oh" expression that still makes me angry when I think about it, because he kept pushing after. He took another step. The hollow sound again. Miley's grabbed my sleeve. "We should go back," she whispered. I wanted to, I really did. But Roan was already moving forward, slow, filming with his camera like he thought he'd found something interesting. "I think it's an old culvert," he said, "or a snow bridge." I told myself that too. Snow bridge, common, dangerous but explainable. Then the hollow beneath us tapped back. One single tap from under the snow, we all stopped. And the tap came again directly beneath Roan's foot, but not from the snow breaking, from below, like something inside the ground had knocked on the underside of the world. Roan's face changed. That's the moment he stopped being adventurous and started being human. He whispered, "What the hell?" The tapping continued, moving under the snow in a line toward the center of the hollow. Tap, tap, tap. And with each tap, the snow surface dimpled slightly, like something was pushing up from beneath, testing for weak spots. We backed up together, slow, careful, trying not to make sudden movements like we were dealing with a wild animal. Then, right in the center of the hollow, the snow split open, not with an explosion, not dramatic. It simply parted like fabric being pulled apart. A pale shape rose through it, not a whole body, just a head, oval, too long. Skin stretched thin and damp, with patches of dark soil stuck to it. No eyes, no nose, just smooth flesh where features should be, except for a small round opening that might have been a mouth, puckered like the end of a glove finger. It lifted higher and 2 thin legs jointed wrong unfolded from beneath it. Like a spider's legs but thicker, more anatomical, like they had bones inside. I know that's 2 paragraphs of description and it's already too much, but that image is burned into me. It was real enough to make my brain stop trying to reason. Roan made a choking sound. Miley squeezed my arm so hard her nails cut through my sleeve. Then the thing made a sound, not a roar, not a hiss. It copied Miley's laugh from earlier, that exact little laugh she made when she'd called Roan dramatic. Hearing that laugh come out of a featureless head, out of a hole that shouldn't make words, made my stomach flip. We ran not gracefully, not like in movies. We ran like people in snow, slipping, arms windmilling, breath tearing out of our throats. Behind us, we heard the snow breaking open in multiple places, like ice cracking on a lake. More dimples, more taps. Roan dropped his camera. I remember the black shape tumbling into snow, the strap snapping back like a whip. We didn't stop to get it. We ran until my lungs felt like they were full of needles and my legs turned to wood. We followed our own footprints back because they were the only map. At one point, Miley's fell hard and I had to haul her up by her backpack strap. She was crying and laughing at the same time, this hysterical sound that didn't sound like her. The brushing sound on our right became faster, like something skittering through underbrush. Too quick to be a person, too coordinated to be an animal. We burst out onto the road like we were breaking the surface of water. The sky had gotten darker, the light fading fast, and the car sat there half buried in plow snow like a lifeboat. We piled in. Roan's hands shook so badly he dropped the keys twice. When the engine started, I actually sobbed, like a release. As we pulled away, I looked back. In the gap between the trees, at the edge of the trail, something stood upright, taller now than it had been in the hollow. Its legs spread like it was bracing. And from its smooth head, that little puckered mouth hole opened and closed silently, like it was tasting the air. Then it did something that made my skin crawl. It tilted its head just slightly and copied Roan's voice from earlier, cheerful, bright. Quick, out and back. And then it laughed with Miley's laugh again. The aftermath proof came 2 days later when Roan finally went out to his car to clean it. He found his camera in the trunk. Dry, clean, battery full. He swears he never put it there. And on the camera's memory card, there was a final video clip, 10 seconds long, shot from inside that hollow, looking up through the snow split toward our faces as we stood at the edge, like something had been filming us from underneath. Story 4. There's a kind of cabin you inherit that doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a chore someone wrapped in nostalgia. Mine belonged to my grandmother's cousin, Solene, who used it as a writing retreat, which mostly meant she went up there to drink tea and complain about her neighbors who didn't exist. When she died, the cabin passed down the line in a way that made no sense, and suddenly my name was on a piece of paper with a property lot number I'd never visited. I didn't want it. I didn't have the money to maintain it, but I also couldn't stand the idea of strangers buying it and tearing it down, because I'd spent one childhood summer there, and I still remembered the way the screen door slapped shut, and how the lake smelled like algae and sunscreen. So I went in late fall, maybe October, to lock it up properly before snow. The forest was in that in-between state, damp leaves, gray sky, everything smelling like mushrooms. I packed like I was going for one night because that's what I told myself it would be. One night. Close shutters, drain water, leave. I brought a cheap bottle of wine because I wanted to romanticize it. I brought a paperback that got bent in my bag. I brought a bag of salt and vinegar chips that made my tongue raw. I brought a new flashlight with a sticker still on it that said ultra bright, which felt like a lie later. The cabin sat at the end of a narrow trail you can't really call a road. The last 10 minutes were just driving over roots and rocks, wincing at every scrape under my car. When I arrived, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not cabin smell, not old wood. A sweet, heavy smell like overripe fruit. It was coming from the porch. There on the porch boards was a pile of apples. Not in a bag, not in a basket, just stacked, neat, like someone had built a little mound. The apples were fresh, no rot, no bruises, and there were no apple trees nearby, just fir and birch. I told myself a neighbor left them, someone kind, someone who knew Solene. But the weird thing was there were no footprints in the mud around the porch. None, just my tire tracks and my own boots. I didn't eat the apples. I don't know why that feels important, but it does. I didn't touch them either. I stepped around them like they were a sleeping animal. Inside, everything was where I remembered it. Crochet blankets. A framed photo of Solene standing beside a canoe, smiling like she'd won something. A small ceramic dish with keys in it. I set mine there out of habit and immediately regretted it, because the sound of metal on ceramic echoed too loudly in the small room. I got to work, doing the boring chores, shutting shutters, checking for leaks, draining water. Mundane, comforting. Then I found the basement door. I didn't remember a basement door. It was in the back room, behind a shelf of old books. A small square trapdoor in the floor with a metal ring. I stood over it a long time, trying to pull the memory up. Had it always been there? Had I just not noticed as a kid? Maybe Solene added it later. I told myself it was a crawl space, a place for storage, probably full of spiders and old jars. I lifted the ring. The door opened with a reluctant groan, like it had been sealed by dampness. Cold air poured up, smelling like earth, and that same sweet fruit smell stronger now. I shined my flashlight down. It wasn't a basement, it was a hole. A narrow shaft dug into the ground, lined with old boards that were black with moisture. And halfway down, nailed into the boards, were little strips of fabric. At first I thought they were rags. Then I realized they were pieces of clothing. Sleeves, a sock, a strip of lace. All different colors, all pinned like trophies. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was Solene being eccentric, some kind of art, some weird old person craft. Then the light caught something at the bottom, a mirror. A full-length mirror, upright, leaning against the dirt wall. It made no sense. How did it get down there? Why would anyone bring a mirror into a hole? I should have closed the trapdoor. I should have walked away. But curiosity is a muscle you can't always control. I climbed down the ladder that was bolted into the boards. It creaked and shifted under my weight. Halfway down I paused because the air was so cold it made my teeth ache. At the bottom, the dirt floor was damp and uneven. The mirror stood there, reflecting my flashlight beam back at me in a pale streak. I stepped closer. In the mirror I saw myself, flashlight, messy hair, anxious eyes. Normal. Then behind me in the reflection I saw Solene, not like in the photo upstairs, not young, not alive. She stood in the narrow space behind my shoulders, wearing a wet nightgown that clung to her like seaweed. Her hair hung in ropes, dripping dark water onto the dirt. But the worst part, my iconic moment, the one that still makes my hands go cold when I think about it, was her face. Her mouth was filled with apple seeds, not just a few, packed full, bulging her cheeks like she was holding marbles. And as I stared, those seeds shifted, like they were moving on their own, clicking softly against her teeth. I spun around so fast my flashlight beam went wild. There was nothing behind me, just boards and dirt. I turned back to the mirror. Solene was still there, and she was smiling, seeds spilling out between her lips and dropping soundlessly onto the dirt at my feet. I backed away, panicking, trying to climb the ladder, but my boots slipped on damp soil and I fell hard onto my hip. Pain shot up my side. Above me the trapdoor slammed shut. The sound was absolute, final. My flashlight flickered once like it was offended by the dark. I screamed, I pounded on the trapdoor, the wood didn't budge. I told myself it was swelling. I told myself it had fallen shut on its own. I told myself I could push it. But then from the mirror, Soline's voice, soft, amused, filled the hole. "Stay," she said. "You'll ruin it if you leave." I don't know what it was. I don't want to. The mirror fogged over, as if someone was breathing on it from the inside. Then slowly, a handprint appeared on the glass, from the inside out. I scrambled up the ladder, pain and panic making me clumsy. I slammed my shoulder into the trapdoor until something in the wood cracked. The ring tore skin off my fingers as I grabbed it and yanked. The door gave way with a wet pop, like suction breaking. I fell onto the floor upstairs and rolled away from the opening like it was a mouth. I didn't close it. I didn't have the courage. I just grabbed my keys from the ceramic dish, except my keys weren't there. For one stupid, disorienting second I thought, of course they're not there, because nothing is normal. Then I saw them, hanging from the doorknob, neatly looped, like someone had placed them there to help. I ran out of that cabin so fast I left my bag, my wine, everything. I didn't even shut the door. I got in my car and drove with my fingers bleeding onto the steering wheel. The aftermath proof came when I got home and finally unpacked what I'd grabbed in my panic. My coat pocket was full of apple seeds, hundreds of them. I hadn't been carrying apples. I hadn't been anywhere near a tree. And when I poured them out into the sink, one of the seeds had something carved into it, just a tiny looping shape, like the symbols I'd seen nailed to those fabric strips in the hole. Story 5. The job was simple. I was part of a 2-person crew doing wildlife camera maintenance. Swap SD cards, replace batteries, make sure the housings weren't broken. It was one of those gigs that sounds peaceful until you're actually out there, alone in trees that all look the same and a cold wind that makes everything creak like it's alive. My partner was Jayek, a quiet guy who hummed when he worked. Not songs you'd recognize, just little wandering notes. He had a habit of chewing sunflower seeds and spitting the shells into a baggie, very neat, like he couldn't stand mess. You were set up to hit 4 cameras along a line. The first 2 were normal. Deer tracks, moose droppings, the occasional blurry coyote at night. The kind of footage that makes you bored, which is honestly the best case scenario in the woods. The 3rd camera was where things started wrong. It was mounted on a tree beside an old cut line, straight corridor through the forest where loggers used to move equipment. The cut line was half grown in now, but it still had that unnatural straightness, like a scar. We reached the camera and found the housing open. Not broken, not forced, just unlatched. Jayek frowned, muttered something in Polish under his breath, and started checking the clasp. He said maybe a branch hit it. Maybe the plastic warped in cold. I told myself the same. Then I noticed the camera lens was facing the wrong way. It wasn't pointing at the trail like it should. It was turned toward the woods, toward nothing. Except when I looked into the woods, it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a room full of people holding their breath. We swapped the SD card anyway. Jayek shoved the old one in his pocket. We walked to the 4th camera. The light was fading, the air turning that deep blue. Halfway there, we started hearing footsteps behind us, not crunching like an animal, not irregular. 2 steps, pause, 2 steps, pause, like someone copying how humans walk without understanding the rhythm. I turned around twice and saw nothing. Jayek turned around once and didn't say anything, but his humming stopped. We reached the 4th camera and found it wasn't there. The strap was still around the tree. The housing was gone, cleanly removed. That's when we stopped pretending it was normal. Jayek said very quietly, "We go back now." We didn't run yet. We walked fast, because running in forest terrain is how you break an ankle. But our pace was urgent, controlled panic. The footsteps followed, closer now, matching us. Then, from ahead on the cut line, we heard my voice, not shouting, just calling like I'd wandered ahead and wanted them to catch up. "Hey, over here." I stopped so hard my boot dug into snow. Jake stopped too. He stared at me. His eyes were wide and flat like glass. I whispered, "That wasn't me." Ahead, my voice called again, a little irritated this time. "Come on, this way." We didn't answer. We backed off the cut line into the trees, moving sideways like we were trying to slip out of a spotlight. The forest got denser. Branches snagged our jackets. The sound of our breathing got loud. And then behind us, the footsteps stopped. Silence. I hated the silence more than the footsteps, because silence meant it had decided something. We kept moving, slower now, trying to pick our way through. Jake pulled out his phone like that would help. No signal. We found a small depression between roots where we could crouch. We huddled there like animals, listening. That's when we heard the clicking, not branches, not insects. A dry, rapid clicking like a tongue against teeth. It moved around us, circling, never stepping on twigs, never crunching snow. And then this is the one moment I saw it clearly. Something leaned down between two hanging boughs and looked into our hiding spot. It had a face that looked like it had been assembled wrong. Skin pulled tight, as if stretched over a frame too small. The nose was barely there. The eyes were open but unfocused, like glass marbles set in wax. And the mouth was too wide, but not in a supernatural way. In a human way, like someone had cut the corners and let them heal badly. It stared at us, head tilted. Then it spoke in my voice, but with the wrong cadence, like reading a language it didn't fully understand. "Found you." Jake made a sound that was almost a sob. I grabbed his sleeve and yanked him up, and we ran then, stupidly, blindly, because hiding was over. We tore through trees toward where we thought the road was. The clicking followed, faster, closer, like it could move without effort. At one point, Jake stumbled and I heard him swear, and then he screamed because something yanked his backpack strap. Not hard enough to pull him down, just enough to show it could touch him. We burst onto the cut line again and ran straight down it, because straight lines are easier. Bad idea, but we were out of options. The clicking became louder right behind us. Then it stopped abruptly, like hitting an invisible wall. We didn't stop running until we saw our truck, pale in the fading light, sitting at the edge of the cut line. We dove in. Jake slammed the door, hands shaking. I started the engine, and for one horrible second it wouldn't turn over. Then it caught. As we pulled away, I looked back. At the edge of the cut line, right where the straight corridor met the dense trees, something stood half hidden. It didn't step out, it just watched, like it couldn't cross that line. The aftermath proof came when we got back to the office and reviewed the SD card from the third camera. We expected maybe a bear, maybe someone messing with it. The footage was hours of nothing. Then, at 16:12 broad daylight, the camera suddenly turned by itself slowly, like an invisible hand rotated it. And the lens settled on one single close-up, a face pressed against it, so close the glass fogged. Not animal, not human. And in the fog, drawn with a fingertip from the inside, was a smiley face. Story 6. I didn't go into the Quebec forest for adventure. I went because my car died in the worst possible place. It was one of those narrow two-lane roads with nothing but trees on both sides and snow piled high like walls. My check engine light had been on for weeks. I'd been ignoring it like people do, like if you don't look at a problem it might get embarrassed and go away. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then everything went quiet except for the hiss of my tires on snow. I pulled over as far as I could, hazard lights blinking like weak little heartbeats. No signal. Of course. I sat there for a while, trying to decide if I should stay with the car or walk. The heater still worked for a bit, and I kept telling myself someone would come by. A snowplow, a truck, anyone, but the road stayed empty. I remember chewing on a mint that had melted into a sticky lump in its wrapper. I remember my fingers smelling like gasoline from checking under the hood. I remember the way the steering wheel felt too cold even through my gloves. After maybe an hour, maybe less, maybe more, I decided to walk. There was a faint track leading off the road into the woods. Not a trail exactly, more like a maintenance path. I figured it might lead to a cabin or some kind of service shed. I told myself it was practical. I told myself it was better than sitting in a dead car until night. The path went in only a few meters before the trees closed around me. The snow muffled everything. My hazard lights became distant, blinking orange through branches like a dying fire. Then behind me I heard my car door close. A solid, unmistakable thunk. I froze, half-turned, heart pounding. I told myself it was the wind. Maybe the door hadn't latched. Maybe the frame shifted. I walked back toward the road, pushing through branches, and when I got there my car was wrong. Not damaged, not moved, just wrong. The hazard lights were off. The driver's side door was open, and inside on the driver's seat was a small pile of snow, clean and white, like it had been scooped and placed carefully. I stared at it until my eyes hurt. Snow doesn't pile neatly on a seat through an open door unless someone puts it there. I slammed the door shut and locked it. The key fob beep sounded too loud. Then I heard my own voice from deeper in the woods, not yelling, just talking, like someone on a phone call. "Yeah, I'm on my way, it's fine." I didn't answer, I didn't move. The voice continued, closer now. "I found the path, I'm coming." The words were exactly what I'd been thinking, exactly what I'd been telling myself. My mouth went dry. I backed away from the path, back toward the road. And then my voice changed tone, cheerful now, like calling a friend. "Hey, don't leave me." That made me snap. That made me run back to the car because whatever was happening, I wanted metal around me again. Locked doors, glass. I got in, slammed the door, locked it, and sat there breathing hard. The car smelled like cold fabric and stale mints. Outside, the woods were still. Then a hand tapped the window, not hard, not threatening, just a polite tap. I stared straight ahead. The tap came again, closer to my ear. I turned my head slowly and saw something that I still can't put into the right category in my mind. A face in the window, but not pressed flat like a person, not fogging the glass. It was as if the face was under the glass, like the window was a thin layer of ice, and the thing was on the other side of reality, pushing up against it. The features were blurred, like looking at someone through water. But the eyes, if they were eyes, were too close together, and they didn't blink. And the mouth moved in a slow, exaggerated way, forming my name. Then the face smiled, and the glass itself creaked, like it was being stretched. I screamed. I hit the horn, holding it down until the sound became one long, continuous wail. The face didn't flinch. It leaned closer. And in one vivid, impossible moment, the window glass bowed inward around its cheek, like the glass had become soft. That's when I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my ice scraper, the cheap plastic one, and I slammed it against the window where the face was pushing. The scraper didn't break the glass. It hit it like hitting a drum, but the face recoiled. The glass snapped back to normal. Outside, the thing's outline shifted, like it didn't like being acknowledged. Then, from the woods, a second voice, my own voice again, called out in panic, like I was lost. "Please, I'm freezing." That voice broke my heart for half a second, because it sounded like me on my worst day, like me begging. And then I realized that was the point. I started the car again, not expecting it to work, because it hadn't. The engine caught immediately. I didn't question it. I just drove. I drove with my hazard lights off, because I didn't want to draw attention, which is irrational, but that's where my brain went. I drove until I hit a town and saw streetlights, and a gas station, and the normal smell of fried food. The aftermath proof came the next morning when I went back with a tow truck driver to retrieve my car. The driver's side window had a perfect handprint on the outside, but the print wasn't from skin. It looked like frost, except it was shaped like a hand with too many joints, and in the center of the palm, etched into the frost like a signature, was my name, spelled correctly in a handwriting that matched mine. Story 7. I've never been a ghost person. I'm the friend who rolls their eyes when someone says a place is haunted. I like facts and I like explanations. That's what I told myself anyway, but I was the one who suggested we go. It was after a rough breakup, and my friend Nia, who has more patience than I deserve, said I needed a reset. Fresh air, trees, quiet. So we booked a small rental cabin in the Quebec forest, not far from a lake. The listing photos were all warm lighting and knitted throws, and a little wood stove. The kind of place that sells you an idea of yourself, calm, healed, sipping tea. We arrived in late afternoon. The sky was low and gray. The cabin was smaller than the pictures, which is always the case. The key was in a lockbox with a sticky button that wouldn't press right. The porch light flickered like it was undecided. Inside, it was clean in that rental way, too clean, like nobody actually lives there. The towels smelled strongly of detergent. The plates were stacked with military precision. There was a bowl of decorative pine cones on the table that felt like it had been placed by someone who's never held a pine cone. We unpacked. Nia made instant ramen because she said it was comfort food, and then immediately regretted it because the smell lingered. I opened a bottle of sparkling water that went flat in 10 minutes. I found a board game missing half the pieces and laughed. Normal stuff. We went for a short walk before dark, just down to the lake. The shoreline was half frozen, thin ice cracking softly. The trees leaned over the water like they were eavesdropping. On the way back, we noticed a trail sign nailed to a tree. No official markings, just a piece of wood with one word burned into it. RETOUR, return. I remember Nia saying, "That's ominous," and laughing, but her laugh was thin. I told myself it was someone's joke, a warning about getting lost. Common sense turned into art. That night, the first weird thing happened while we were brushing our teeth. The bathroom mirror fogged over normal because of the shower steam, but as the fog spread, it left one clear shape in the center. A circle, perfectly clean, like someone had pressed their face against the mirror from the other side and warmed it. And inside that circle, a single line appeared slowly, as if written by a fingertip. "Don't turn around." I read it twice before my brain accepted it as words. I even looked for a marker, some prank. There was nothing. Nia came in behind me and saw my expression. "What?" she said. I didn't want to say it out loud, saying it would make it real, but I stepped aside and let her see. Her face went pale in a way I've never seen on her. She whispered, okay, it's probably." She stopped because the mirror, right under the words, began to fog in a new pattern. Not random, not steam. Finger marks appearing one after another, as if someone invisible was pressing each fingertip into the fog from the outside. Tap, 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 like a hand testing the glass. We left the bathroom without rinsing our toothbrushes. We sat on the couch in the living room with the lights on too bright, pretending we were fine. We put on a show, volume low, as if sound would attract attention. Then we heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy steps. Nia muted the TV. We stared at each other. The steps crossed the porch boards, stopped at the door. Then a scratching sound, gentle at first. Like someone trying to find the keyhole. I told myself it was a raccoon, a branch, the house settling, But then the doorknob rattled, and a voice, male, calm, spoke through the door. "Can you let me in? I'm lost." It sounded so normal, so reasonable. If I'd heard it in a city hallway, I'd have opened the door without thinking. Nia grabbed my wrist hard. She mouthed, "No." The voice came again, a little strained now, like he was cold. "Please, it's freezing." I moved toward the window to peek through the curtain. Nia shook her head, furious, terrified. I only lifted the curtain a sliver. The porch was empty, no person, no shadow, just the porch boards under the porch light. And then in the glass reflection I saw something behind me, not in the room, in the reflection, like the window was showing an angle that didn't exist. A tall shape in the corner of the living room, right where the coat rack was. It hadn't been there a second ago. I could see it in the reflection, but not when I turned my head. I snapped my gaze to the corner. Nothing. I looked back at the reflection. The shape was closer. That's when my body understood before my mind did. We weren't dealing with something outside trying to get in. It was already inside, but only in the places we weren't directly looking. Nia whispered, "We leave. Now." We grabbed our coats, our car keys. I left my phone on the counter by accident and didn't realize until later. We moved like we were afraid of making noise. As we reached the door, the voice outside changed. It became Nia's voice. Soft, pleading, exactly her tone when she talks to her little brother. "Please," it said through the door, "don't leave me." Nia made a strangled sound, like she'd been punched. She backed away from the door, eyes wide. Then the voice became mine. "Wait," it said, "I forgot something." That one hit me like a hook in the stomach, because I had forgotten something. I had forgotten my phone. My brain leapt toward the excuse to stay. Nia slapped my hand away from the doorknob. "No," she whispered, fierce. "No." We ran out anyway. The porch boards were empty beneath our boots. The air outside was colder than it should have been, like stepping into a freezer. We sprinted to the car. Nia fumbled the keys. The car alarm chirped because she hit the wrong button. And in that chirp, in that brief electronic sound, I heard something mimic it perfectly from the trees. A chirp, same pitch, but organic, wet. We got in. The engine started. Thank God. As we pulled out, headlights sweeping across the cabin, I saw the iconic thing that has kept me from ever renting a cabin again. In the living room window, behind the curtains, there were faces, not pressed against the glass, not looking out like people. They were arranged in a vertical line, one above the other, like someone had stacked masks in the air. Each one pale, blank, with only a mouth. No eyes, no nose, and each mouth opened and closed in perfect sync, silently mouthing the word. Retour. Return. We drove until we hit a highway and the world felt wide again. The aftermath proof came the next day when the rental host messaged me, irritated, asking why we'd taken the mirror. I thought it was a mistake. I said we didn't take anything. They sent a photo. Their bathroom wall, where the mirror should have been, was bare. And in the center of the bare wall, carved into the paint like someone used a key, was one sentence. "Don't turn around." We didn't take the mirror. I don't know where it went. But sometimes, when I'm brushing my teeth at home and the mirror fogs, I find myself staring too long at the edges, waiting to see if the glass decides to show me something that isn't there. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.